What follows is yet another evolutionary conundrum that dramatically points to intelligent design, rather than the pseudoscience of evolution origins proposition. This topic delves into microbiology and deals with the problem of the so-called evolution of microorganisms. One mystery that evolutionists have yet to solve is how randomly shaped and distributed chemicals were organized and then concentrated and then combined into the first living bacterial cell. The next great mystery is how eukaryotic cells, or cells with a nucleus, could have come from bacteria. You see, living things are grouped into three large clusters of closely related organisms, called domains: archaea, bacteria, and eukaryota. Archaea and bacteria are small, relatively simple cells surrounded by a membrane and a cell wall, with a circular strand of DNA containing their genes. They are called prokaryotes. However, virtually all the life that we see each day, including plants and animals, belongs to the third domain, eukaryota. Eukaryotic cells are typically much larger than bacterial cells. They have much more DNA, and much more of that DNA is dedicated to self-regulation. And eukaryotic cells have compartments for the performance of very important tasks like energy production. The distinguishing features of eukaryotic cells are, number one, these cells contain an enclosed nucleus. Picture an egg which contains a yolk. Number two, these cells contain a multiplicity of organelles, or small organ-like structures that perform specific and interrelated or symbiotic tasks. Number three, these cells contain a structure. That is, they possess what is called a cytoskeleton for internal structural support. And number four, eukaryotic cells contain a unique information exchange system. You see, the food and waste transport in the eukaryotic cell involves a transport molecule, which is a linear motor that carries waste and food along the microtubules which connect the cell wall and all the internal organelles. This transport molecule is called a kinesin motor. Kinesin motors were first discovered by accident in 1981 by a Dartmouth professor, Robert D. Allen, when for the first time these little round objects, kinesin motors, were observed moving along the nerve fiber within the eukaryotic cell. Now for the evolutionary conundrum. According to the evolutionary fairy tale, single-celled organisms, which magically appeared from a chemical soup with no intelligent input whatsoever, had to develop ways to cope with an ever-changing environment. As oxygen and radiation levels changed, new information supposedly appeared to accommodate these changes in the environment. Multicellular life then flourished in the prehistoric oceans, and certain organisms began to use other organisms for food. Eventually, photosynthesis allowed a brand new cellular lifestyle, and so fungi and plants appeared. The problem with the foregoing account of evolution is that it is all just a story. It is fiction. It is from the imagination and not from scientific discovery. Virtually no evidence supports the statements, but the evolutionist simply says, well, they must have happened or life wouldn't exist in the forms that we see today. But you see, this is circular reasoning, and it lends zero scientific support to the theory of evolution. But such is the case with most of the evolution fairy tale of magical pixie dust and life popping out of non-life randomly, accidentally, with no intelligence involved. Never mind the puzzling question of, if life really did originate without intelligence, then where did information exchange and cellular needs and coping mechanisms originate? Do not each of these states require at least some level of intelligence? Well, of course they do. A child can see this fact. In case one is offended by my use of the word fairy tale, consider this quote from the book entitled Tracing the History of Eukaryotic Cells, published by Columbia University Press. Quote, "In tracking the emergence of the eukaryotic cell, one enters a kind of wonderland where scientific pursuit leads almost to fantasy. Cell and molecular biologists must construct cellular worlds in their own imaginations. Imagination, to some degree, is essential for grasping the key events in cellular history." Well, there you have it. Evolution is a wonderland of fantasy, developed in the imaginations of the evolutionists. But isn't this what we creationists have been saying? all along? Do you ever wish that you could more powerfully, succinctly, and accurately speak to the message of your Christian faith and the Word of God? This is the book you need, The Magic Man in the Sky, Effectively Defending the Christian Faith. This book has been featured on TBN, Atlanta Live, dozens of radio programs, and hundreds of markets. It was rave reviewed by the Washington Times, and it was called a must-read book. Considering the times in which we now live, you need this book. Get it today on Amazon.com or the WND Superstore.